My name is Olivia Morgan, and at 27, I never expected to be fighting my own family for my grandparents' legacy. When I graduated law school, my first act was moving my grandparents' $3 million estate into a trust. Last week, my parents and sister showed up grinning. We had the house signed into Dad's name. You are out by Friday. I just smiled and replied, "You really think I would let that happen?" Their faces when they returned with movers and saw who was waiting on the porch, priceless. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. If this resonates with you, please hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, you will want to see how this family drama unfolds. To understand why I took such drastic measures to protect my grandparents' estate, you need to know the history. My grandparents Harold and Martha Morgan raised me from the age of 5. My parents Richard and Elaine essentially abandoned me to pursue their careers in another state. What they were actually pursuing was a life free from responsibility, bouncing between get-rich-quick schemes that inevitably failed. My childhood home was a beautiful Victorian in a historic neighborhood in Boston. The house had been in my grandfather's family for 3 generations, along with several other valuable properties and investments that made up their estate. The estimated value hovered around $3 million, not an insignificant sum by any measure. But to me, that house was simply home, the place where I learned what real family meant. Every morning, Grandma Martha would wake me up with the smell of fresh baked muffins. "Rise and shine, little lawyer," she would call me, long before I ever considered law school. Grandpa Harold taught me to fish in the small pond at the local park, his patience infinite as I tangled line after line. In the evenings, we would sit in the library, each with our own book, occasionally sharing passages we found interesting. Those quiet moments of connection meant everything to me. From my grandparents, I learned the values that would shape my life: honesty, hard work, and responsibility. Grandpa always said, "Your word is your bond, Olivia. Break it and you lose something you can never buy back." Grandma emphasized education and independence. A woman must be able to stand on her own 2 feet, especially when others try to knock her down. My relationship with my biological parents and younger sister Valerie was complicated at best. They would visit maybe twice a year, usually around Christmas, when gifts were expected, or randomly when they needed money. Each visit followed the same pattern: exaggerated affection, followed by casual questions about how Grandpa's investments were doing, culminating in a teary story about unexpected expenses and requests for loans that were never repaid. Dad had filed for bankruptcy twice before I turned 10. Mom had been involved in several questionable business ventures, selling everything from miracle diet pills to timeshares. They lived beyond their means, always chasing the next opportunity that would finally make them rich. Valerie, 7 years younger than me, grew up watching and learning from them. By her teens, she had mastered their techniques of manipulation and entitlement. "Your sister should come live with us too," Grandma once suggested after a particularly disastrous visit when Valerie had stolen money from my piggy bank. But my parents refused. Valerie was their baby, the child they could manage to parent because she demanded so little actual parenting. As my grandparents aged, the family dynamic grew increasingly tense. Dad began calling more frequently, asking pointed questions about their health, their will, their financial advisors. Mom would send links to retirement communities, suggesting the house was too much for them to manage. Each visit became more stressful, with whispered conversations ending abruptly when I entered rooms. Throughout my school years, I excelled, academically encouraged by my grandparents' unwavering support. While other kids got new phones or trendy clothes as rewards, My grandparents invested in books, museum memberships, and educational trips. When I was 16, I started working part-time at the local library to help with expenses. My grandparents insisted it was unnecessary, but I saw how prescription costs and property taxes were straining their fixed income. My decision to study law was influenced by an incident in our neighborhood when I was a senior in high school. An elderly couple, the Wilsons, lost their life savings to their son, who had convinced them to sign over power of attorney and then emptied their accounts. The helplessness and betrayal they experienced haunted me. I wanted to understand how to prevent such injustices, especially for vulnerable seniors. College and then law school were challenging as my grandparents' health began to decline. Grandpa developed heart problems that required multiple surgeries. Grandma was diagnosed with early-stage dementia. I attended a local university so I could live at home and help care for them, turning down scholarships to more prestigious schools farther away. During my final year of law school, I was taking classes during the day, studying at night, and helping with medical appointments and home care in between. It was exhausting, but they had sacrificed so much for me. It was simply what family does. The day I graduated from law school was bittersweet. Standing in my cap and gown scanning the audience, I spotted Grandpa in his wheelchair oxygen tank beside him, with Grandma sitting next to him, occasionally looking confused, but smiling broadly whenever our eyes met. They had insisted on attending despite their health concerns. Wild horses could not keep us away, Grandpa had declared that morning as I helped him with his tie. My parents and Valerie were noticeably absent despite receiving invitations months in advance. Mom had texted that morning with a vague excuse about car trouble. I had stopped expecting their presence at important moments in my life long ago, but their absence still stung. After the ceremony, we celebrated at Grandpa's favorite Italian restaurant. He raised a shaky toast with his water glass to our Olivia, who makes us prouder every day. The finest granddaughter, and now the finest lawyer in Massachusetts. Grandma nodded enthusiastically, adding smart as a whip, just like her grandfather. Their pride in my accomplishment filled me with both joy and determination to be worthy of their faith in me. During my final semester, I had taken an elective course on elder law and estate planning. What began as a practical choice, given my grandparents' situation, evolved into a passionate interest. Professor Sarah Winters, a former prosecutor who specialized in elder abuse cases, opened my eyes to the prevalence of financial exploitation of seniors, often by family members. The greatest threat to elderly individuals' financial security rarely comes from strangers, Professor Winters told our class. 70% of elder financial abuse is perpetrated by family members or trusted caregivers. The sense of betrayal is often more devastating than the financial loss. Her words resonated deeply with me. I began researching protective measures, particularly irrevocable trusts, which could shield assets from predatory family members while ensuring the elderly person retained control during their lifetime. I started noticing the parallels between the case studies we discussed and my own family situation with increasing alarm. 2 weeks after graduation, I made a secret appointment with Nancy Hoffman, an elder law specialist recommended by Professor Winters. I brought copies of my grandparents' financial documents, which I had access to as I had been helping manage their bills. Nancy reviewed everything carefully, her expression growing more concerned. "Your instincts are correct," she told me finally. "Given the pattern of behavior you have described and these recent inquiries from your father about property values, there is cause for concern. An irrevocable trust would offer significant protection, but your grandparents would need to establish it voluntarily. Have you discussed this with them?" I had not, fearing they would dismiss my concerns out of loyalty to their son. That evening I gathered my courage and broached the subject gently after dinner. Grandpa initially reacted exactly as I had feared. "Richard is many things, but he would never try to take our home," he insisted, his voice gruff with emotion. "He is still my son, Olivia." Grandma was quiet, twisting her wedding ring as she often did when anxious. "What makes you think such a thing, dear?" she asked finally. Reluctantly, I shared what I had observed, the increasing frequency of visits whenever their health took a downturn, the questions about their investments, the not-so-subtle hints about the house being too much work. Then I showed them something I had been keeping to myself, an email from Dad to a real estate agent, inquiring about comparable sales in their neighborhood and potential market value of their home, which I had discovered while helping Grandpa with his computer. Grandma began to cry quietly. "He borrowed $50,000 5 years ago," she admitted, "for a business opportunity that could not wait. He promised to pay it back with interest, but when your grandfather asked about it last Christmas, he became angry, said we were wealthy enough not to miss it, that we owed him for taking you in instead of him." Grandpa's face had grown increasingly pale. "Show me that trust information again," he said finally, his voice heavy with resignation. 3 days later, we met with Nancy Hoffman, and the process of establishing the Morgan Family Trust began. The legal process was complex, requiring multiple meetings with attorneys, financial advisors, and the bank. We structured the trust so that my grandparents retained full control and benefit of all assets during their lifetime, but after their passing, I would become the trustee. The house, their investment portfolio, and other valuable possessions were transferred into the trust's ownership, protecting them from potential claims or manipulation. Throughout the process, we maintained absolute secrecy. My grandparents told no one, not even their closest friends, about the arrangement. I was still living with them, working at a small law firm specializing in family law and beginning to build my career while helping care for them. To outsiders, nothing had changed. But I slept better knowing that their legacy and home were protected from whatever schemes my parents might be contemplating. 6 months after we established the trust, Grandpa's health took a dramatic turn for the worse. What we had thought was simply fatigue related to his heart condition was diagnosed as advanced-stage pancreatic cancer. The prognosis was grim, 3 to 6 months at most. We were devastated. Somehow, news of his diagnosis traveled quickly to my parents. Suddenly, they began calling daily and visiting weekly, something unprecedented in all the years I had lived with my grandparents. Valerie even took a leave of absence from her job at a nail salon to help out, though her help mainly consisted of going through closets and cabinets cataloging items of value when she thought no one was watching. One evening, I overheard a conversation between my parents in the garden. They thought everyone was asleep, but I had been up getting medication for Grandpa. "Once the old man is gone, we need to move quickly before she has time to hide anything," Dad was saying. "Mom is so confused these days, she will sign whatever we put in front of her." "What about Olivia?" Mom asked. "She is always watching, and now she is a lawyer." "She is a brand new lawyer with student loans and no real experience," Dad scoffed. "We will offer her a small portion to keep quiet. If she makes trouble, we will contest any will on grounds of undue influence. After all, she has been living here dependent on them, possibly manipulating them. Who would believe her over us, the actual children?" I stood frozen, the glass of water in my hand, growing warm, as they continued planning how they would sell the house, liquidate investments, and finally have the lifestyle they deserved. When Valerie joined them, eagerly adding her own ideas about which antiques would fetch the highest prices, I felt physically ill. The next morning, I checked in with Nancy Hoffman, confirming that all the trust documents were properly filed and unassailable. She reassured me that the protection was solid, but warned me to be vigilant about any attempts to have my grandmother sign new documents once my grandfather passed. As Grandpa grew weaker, he seemed to sense the vultures circling. One night, as I sat with him while he struggled to breathe comfortably, he gripped my hand with surprising strength. "Promise me you will protect your grandmother and this house," he whispered. "It is not just property, Olivia. It is the physical embodiment of our family history, our love, our sacrifices." Richard never understood that. He sees only dollar signs where I see memories. I promised, tears streaming down my face, and he nodded, satisfied. 3 days later, he slipped into a coma. He passed away peacefully the following morning with Grandma and me at his bedside. The funeral was small and dignified, just as Grandpa would have wanted. A few close friends, neighbors, and former colleagues gathered to celebrate his life. My parents and Valerie arrived 20 minutes late, dressed inappropriately flashy for a funeral, and left immediately after the service, claiming they had a long drive ahead. Before leaving, Dad pulled me aside and asked bluntly about the will and when it would be read. I delivered a simple eulogy, focusing on Grandpa's integrity, his gentle wisdom, and his unconditional love. Looking out at the small gathering, I realized that a life well lived is not measured by wealth accumulated, but by love shared. Grandpa had been rich indeed by that measure. After the funeral, the reality of being Grandma's sole caretaker settled heavily on my shoulders. Her dementia had been progressing slowly, but grief accelerated her decline. Some days she recognized me instantly. Other days she would ask repeatedly when Grandpa was coming home. Each time I had to gently remind her that he was gone, watching her heart break anew. I rearranged my work schedule to spend more time at home, taking cases I could largely work on remotely. I hired Margaret, a compassionate home health aide, to stay with Grandma when I needed to be at the office or in court. In the evenings, we established new rituals, watching classic movies Grandma still remembered from her youth, looking through old photo albums, and reading aloud from her favorite books. These activities seemed to anchor her, providing islands of clarity in her increasingly foggy mental state. My parents called occasionally, always asking about Grandma's condition in a way that seemed more like checking on an investment than expressing genuine concern. Each time I provided minimal information, growing increasingly protective as Grandma became more vulnerable. 6 months after Grandpa's death, Grandma developed pneumonia. Despite aggressive treatment, her weakened system could not fight the infection. Her final days were peaceful at home in her own bed, as she had wished. I read to her from Jane Austen, her favorite author, and played the classical music she and Grandpa had loved. On her last night, she had a moment of complete lucidity. She looked at me and squeezed my hand. "Elizabeth," she said, confusing me with my mother, "I am so proud of the woman you have become. So different from—" She trailed off, then refocused. "Take care of our Olivia." Before I could correct her confusion, she had drifted back to sleep. She never woke again, passing quietly in the night, her hand still in mine. The funeral was even smaller than Grandpa's. My parents did not attend at all, sending a generic flower arrangement with a card signed by their secretary. I was not surprised, just sadly confirmed in my understanding of their true nature. I buried my grandmother beside my grandfather in the small cemetery where generations of Morgans rested, taking comfort in knowing they were together again. I returned to an empty house that echoed with memories both comforting and painful. For the first time, I was truly alone without the grandparents who had been my anchors, my true north. But I was also strengthened by their legacy of love and the values they had instilled in me. I would honor them by protecting what they had built and using it as they would have wished. 2 weeks after Grandma's funeral, as I was still adjusting to the silence of the house and the enormity of my loss, the doorbell rang on a Sunday morning. When I opened the door, I found my parents and Valerie standing there, somber expressions carefully arranged on their faces. "Oh, Olivia, Mom," exclaimed, pulling me into a stiff hug that felt more like a performance than genuine affection. "We are so sorry about Mom. We came as soon as we could clear our schedules." Dad nodded solemnly. "Family needs to stick together in times like these," he declared, patting my shoulder awkwardly before stepping past me into the foyer, his eyes already scanning the antique furniture and artwork. Valerie, 20 years old, but dressed like a teenager, gave me a quick side hug. "This house is even bigger than I remembered," she commented, not bothering to hide her assessment of its value. I invited them in with surface politeness, offering coffee and the pastries I had bought the day before. As we sat in the living room, the conversation followed a script I could have written in advance, beginning with cursory questions about Grandma's final days and quickly pivoting to matters of inheritance. "Have you had a chance to look through her papers?" Dad asked, attempting casual indifference. "I assume there is a will that needs to be probated." "I am handling everything," I replied neutrally. Her affairs were in good order. Mom leaned forward, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a sympathetic tone. "You must be so lonely in this big house, all by yourself. It is a lot for one person to maintain." "Actually, I am managing fine," I said. "I love this house." "Well, of course you do," Sweetie Mom said, with a patronizing smile. "But realistically, a young woman like you should be in a modern apartment downtown close to other young professionals. Your father and I have been thinking we could help you sell this place and find something more suitable." Dad nodded enthusiastically. "Property values in this neighborhood are at an all-time high. It would be smart to sell now before the market shifts." "And of course," Valerie added, examining her manicure, "whatever comes from Grandma and Grandpa's estate should be divided fairly between family members. I mean, just because you lived with them does not mean you get everything right." Their transparency was almost comical. If I had not been grieving and disgusted, I might have laughed at how poorly they disguised their greed. Instead, I simply stated that I was not making any decisions about the house in the immediate future and changed the subject. They stayed for 3 days, during which I caught my mother going through Grandma's jewelry box when she thought I was on a work call, my father measuring rooms and taking photos for memories, and Valerie trying to pry information from Margaret about bank accounts and safety deposit boxes. On the second evening, I stepped onto the back porch for some air and overheard my father on his phone speaking with someone about real estate values. "The comps show at least 3.2 million in this market," he was saying. "Maybe more with some updates. We just need to move quickly once we have control." Later that night, I found a browser window left open on Valerie's laptop showing search results for challenging a trust and contesting inheritance. When I checked the browsing history, I discovered searches for local estate attorneys and how to prove undue influence. The next morning, I confronted them gently over breakfast. "I notice you all seem very interested in the house and Grandma's assets," I said calmly. "Is there something specific you are hoping to find?" Dad flushed red but quickly recovered. "Just trying to help you sort things out, honey. You have enough on your plate with your new career and all this grief." Mom nodded vigorously. "We are just concerned about you, darling. Such responsibility for someone so young. And we want to make sure everything is fair," Valerie added pointedly. "Grandma and Grandpa might have been confused in their later years." I simply nodded and said I appreciated their concern, but had everything under control. They left later that day with promises to return soon to help further. The moment their car pulled away, I called Nancy Hoffman and updated her on the situation. She advised me to be vigilant, but assured me the trust was secure. For several weeks I heard nothing from them. I began to hope they had accepted the situation and moved on. I was deep in a new case at work, and finally beginning to establish a routine that did not revolve around caregiving when they reappeared without warning. All three walked up the front path as I was leaving for work, their expressions triumphant. Dad was carrying a folder of documents. "Good morning, Olivia," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "We hate to do this, but we need to talk about your living situation." Mom stepped forward, her smile tight. "We found some papers in our safe deposit box. An older will that your grandparents signed years ago, leaving everything to your father as their only child. We have had it verified by an attorney. We also have papers showing the house has been signed over to Dad," Valerie added gleefully. "The trust you think protects everything, apparently not valid when there is a prior will." Dad extended the folder toward me. "We are not unreasonable. We will give you until Friday to pack your things. We have already lined up a buyer for the house." I looked at their smug faces at the folder of what I was certain were fraudulent documents and felt a strange calm settle over me. "You really think I would let that happen?" I asked quietly. Their confidence faltered momentarily, but Dad recovered quickly. "This is happening whether you like it or not. Friday, Olivia. Be out by noon." As they turned to leave, I called after them. "Before you do anything irrevocable, you might want to consult a better lawyer, one who knows the difference between a genuine will and a fabrication." Dad's face darkened. "Do not threaten me, young lady. You are not the only one who knows about the law." With that parting shot, they left confident in their victory. I immediately called Jake Thompson, a colleague from my firm who specialized in fraud cases, and explained the situation. "Bring me those documents if you can get copies," he said. "This sounds like textbook forgery." I spent the next 2 days preparing for the confrontation I knew was coming. I gathered all the trust documents, contacted the bank and security company, and assembled a small team of legal professionals who were willing to help. On Thursday evening, I sat on the porch, swing Grandpa's favorite spot, and felt his presence beside me. "I will not let them take your legacy," I promised the evening air, "not one piece of it." The moment my family left with their threats and fraudulent documents, I sprang into action. My legal training kicked in, along with the protective instincts my grandparents had nurtured. This was no longer just about an inheritance. It was about honoring my promise to protect my grandparents' legacy and standing up to years of manipulation and entitlement. First, I called Jake Thompson, the best litigator at my firm and a specialist in fraud cases. "Can you come over tonight?" I asked. "My family is trying to steal my grandparents' estate with forged documents. They are giving me until Friday to vacate." Jake arrived within the hour, along with his paralegal. I laid out everything: the trust documents, my grandparents' medical records, showing they were competent when signing the journal. I had kept documenting my parents' suspicious behavior and my recollection of the fraudulent claims they had just made. "If what they showed you is what I think it is, they are committing several felonies," Jake said, his expression grim. "Forgery, fraud, attempted theft by deception. But we need to see those documents to be certain." My next call was to Nancy Hoffman, who had helped establish the trust. "They are making their move," I told her, "and it is as brazen as we feared." Nancy was reassuringly calm. "The trust is ironclad, Olivia, but we should file for an emergency injunction to prevent any recording of fraudulent deeds or transfers. I will draft it tonight and file first thing tomorrow." With my legal team mobilizing, I turned to practical security measures. I called a locksmith who arrived that afternoon to change every lock in the house. Next, I contacted a security company to install cameras covering all entrances. By evening, the house was secure against unauthorized entry. I made a final call to my bank, confirming that all accounts were protected and flagged for unusual activity. The bank manager, who had known my grandparents for decades, was appalled at my situation and personally placed alerts on everything connected to the estate. As night fell, I organized all the documentation for the trust, creating multiple copies stored in different locations. One set in my home safe, another with Jake, a third with Nancy, and digital copies secured in encrypted cloud storage. No single point of failure could compromise our protection. That evening, as I was reviewing everything, my phone began ringing with calls from my parents and Valerie. I let them go to voicemail. The messages started politely, with Dad suggesting we talk things through like adults, but quickly devolved into threats. "You have no idea who you are messing with," the final voicemail from my father growled. "I am your father, and you will respect me. That house and money are rightfully mine, and I will have them one way or another." The next morning, I met with a larger legal team assembled by Jake and Nancy. Sophia Rodriguez, a specialist in estate litigation, reviewed our documents and strategy. "Their claim about a prior will taking precedence over the trust is completely without merit," she confirmed. "Once assets are transferred into an irrevocable trust, they are no longer part of the estate to be distributed by will. Any competent lawyer would know this, which suggests they either have a very bad attorney or, more likely, no legitimate attorney at all." We developed a multi-pronged approach. First, the injunction preventing any property transfers. Second, a cease and desist letter regarding their fraudulent claims. And third, preparation for a potential lawsuit for harassment and attempted fraud if they persisted. "What about the documents they claim to have?" I asked. "The supposed earlier will and property transfer? If they attempt to file those anywhere, we will immediately challenge them as fraudulent," Sophia explained. "We have substantial evidence of your grandparents' intentions through the properly executed trust. Plus, we have their medical records showing they were mentally competent, the ongoing journal you kept, and witnesses like Margaret who can testify to their clear wishes." While the legal team worked, I began gathering evidence about my parents' history of financial misconduct. Through careful research and some contacts from law school, I documented my father's 2 bankruptcies, a tax lien, and a small claims judgment against my mother for a failed business venture where she had taken investments but never delivered products. By Thursday afternoon, my family's desperation was showing. Valerie posted a rambling message on social media, claiming I had manipulated our sick grandparents and stolen the family legacy. She tagged extended family members and old neighbors, trying to rally public opinion against me. My parents took a more direct approach, showing up at my law firm, unannounced, demanding to speak with me. When the receptionist explained I was in court, they refused to leave, causing such a disturbance that security had to escort them out. My colleagues were shocked but supportive. The incident only strengthened their resolve to help me. Later that day, I learned from a concerned neighbor that my father had been going door to door on my street, telling people I was mentally unstable and trying to gather community support for their takeover of the property. Fortunately, most neighbors had known my grandparents and me for years and were suspicious of these sudden concerned relatives they had rarely seen. As Friday approached, I prepared for all contingencies. Jake would be at the house with me, along with Nancy and a notary public to witness any interactions. Margaret would also be present, ready to testify about my grandparents' mental state and stated wishes if needed. I contacted the local police explaining the situation and asking them to be ready to respond if my family attempted forced entry or created a disturbance. The officer I spoke with took detailed notes and promised to flag the address for immediate response. Finally, I set up legal recording devices in the main rooms of the house, ensuring any confrontation would be documented. Massachusetts is a two-party consent state for recordings, but I placed visible signs notifying all entrants that audio and video recording was in progress, satisfying the notification requirement. Thursday night, I barely slept running through scenarios in my mind. But underneath the anxiety was a bedrock of certainty. I was doing exactly what my grandparents would have wanted, protecting the home they had lovingly maintained for generations against those who saw it only as a payday. Whatever happened tomorrow, I would face it with the strength and integrity they had taught me. Friday morning dawned clear and bright, a beautiful spring day that belied the storm brewing in my family affairs. I woke early after a restless night, showered and dressed carefully in a professional Navy suit, automatically reaching for the pearl earrings Grandma had given me for my law school graduation. For important days, she had said. This certainly qualified. By 8:30, my support team had assembled. Jake arrived first, bringing coffee and a reassuring confidence. "We have everything covered legally," he reminded me. "Today is just about standing your ground." Nancy came next with the notary public, a solemn woman named Patricia, who had witnessed hundreds of property disputes. Margaret arrived shortly after, giving me a motherly hug before taking up position in the kitchen, where she began stress baking, the scent of cinnamon rolls soon filling the house. Sophia Rodriguez completed our team, bringing copies of the emergency injunction that had been granted by the court the previous afternoon, prohibiting any recording of property transfers related to the estate, just in case they try to go directly to the Registry of Deeds, she explained. We positioned ourselves strategically. I would meet my family on the front porch, the symbolic threshold they sought to cross. The others would remain inside out of initial sight, but ready to step forward when needed. The folder containing all relevant trust documents, the injunction and evidence of the estate's protected status, sat on the small table beside the porch, swing a visual counterpoint to whatever fraudulent papers my family would bring. At precisely 11:45, 15 minutes before their self-imposed deadline for my eviction, a black SUV pulled up at the curb. Behind it came a large moving truck, its engine rumbling as it double-parked on the narrow street. Several neighbors paused their gardening to watch the spectacle unfold. My father emerged first from the SUV, dressed in what he probably thought was impressive business attire, a slightly too tight suit with flashy cufflinks. My mother followed her face, set in grim determination, designer sunglasses hiding her eyes. Valerie bounced out last, practically skipping with anticipation, phone already in hand, as if ready to document her victory. Behind them, two men climbed down from the moving truck, looking uncomfortable as they sensed the tension. My father waved them forward impatiently. I stood up slowly from the porch, swing the folder in my hand, and waited. Let them come to me on my territory, the home my grandparents had entrusted to my care. Right on time to witness your departure, I see my father called out as they approached the front walk. I hope you are packed and ready to go. He waved the folder he carried, presumably containing his fraudulent documents. I remained silent, standing tall at the top of the porch steps as they approached. Several neighbors had drifted closer, sensing drama, and perhaps concerned for my welfare. "We brought a truck to help with your things," my mother added, in a falsely sweet voice designed to present an image of familial concern to the watching neighbors. "We know this must be difficult." As they reached the bottom of the porch steps, I finally spoke. "Before you come any further, I should inform you that this property is under video and audio surveillance, and there are witnesses inside the house. Anything you say or do is being recorded." That stopped them momentarily. My father recovered first, his smile tightening. "Always the dramatic one, Olivia. This does not change anything. We have legal documents giving us ownership of this property. He waved his folder again. You mean your forged documents? I asked calmly. The ones that supposedly override an irrevocable trust established over a year ago when both my grandparents were alive and legally competent. My mother's smile faltered. Valerie looked uncertainly between her parents, the script clearly not proceeding as planned. My father's face darkened as he climbed the first 2 steps. Now you listen here. This house belongs to me. My parents wanted me to have it. Whatever you tricked them into signing when they were sick does not change that. At that moment, the front door opened behind me, and Jake stepped out, followed by Nancy, Sophia, Patricia, the notary, and Margaret. The sight of 5 adults, clearly professional and prepared, brought my father up short. Mr. Morgan, Jake said pleasantly, I am Jake Thompson, attorney for the Morgan Family Trust. I believe you were just about to accuse your daughter of fraud and undue influence. Please continue. We are recording for the court. My father's mouth opened and closed without sound. My mother grabbed his arm, whispering urgently. The moving truck men shuffled awkwardly, one checking his watch. Perhaps you should tell the movers they will not be needed today, I suggested quietly. Or any day. Finding his voice at last, my father blustered. This is ridiculous. I have a legal right to this property. I have documentation right here. He waved the folder again, but made no move to open it. Sophia stepped forward, her professional demeanor unruffled. As counsel for the estate, I must inform you that we have obtained an emergency injunction preventing any recording of fraudulent property transfers related to this estate. She held out a copy of the court order. Additionally, I should warn you that presenting forged documents to a financial institution or government office is a felony in Massachusetts, punishable by up to 5 years in prison. The color drained from my father's face. My mother stepped forward, trying a different approach. Olivia, honey, there has clearly been a misunderstanding. We only want what is best for the family. Perhaps we can discuss this privately, without all these people. There is nothing to discuss, I said firmly. Grandma and Grandpa established the Morgan Family Trust to protect their assets and legacy. All properties and investments are held by the trust, which I manage as the designated trustee. This was their choice, made freely while they were alive and well. Any documents you have claiming otherwise are fraudulent. My father's frustration boiled over. This is not over, Olivia. I am your father. That counts for something legally. I will fight this to the Supreme Court if necessary. I will make sure everyone knows how you manipulated 2 elderly people. Your reputation will be ruined. Jake stepped forward again. Mr. Morgan, are you threatening to file frivolous lawsuits and engage in defamation because that would constitute harassment and possibly extortion? Should I add that to the record? The moving truck driver approached cautiously. Sir, we are on the clock here. Are we moving anything or not? My father ignored him, his face contorted with rage. You ungrateful little. After everything we have done for you. I could not help the short, incredulous laugh that escaped me. Everything you have done for me. You abandoned me when I was 5 years old. Grandma and Grandpa raised me, loved me, taught me everything important about life and family. You showed up only when you needed money or thought there was something to gain. The naked truth hung in the air between us. Even Valerie looked uncomfortable now, her phone lowered, no longer recording the humiliating scene. I have something else you should hear, I said, pulling out my phone. I played the recording I had made of their conversation in the garden during Grandpa's final days, their voices clear as they plotted to take advantage of Grandma's confusion and cut me out entirely. My mother gasped. My father's face turned an alarming shade of purple. "That is illegal," he sputtered. "You cannot record people without their knowledge." Actually, Nancy interjected, Massachusetts law permits recording if the person recording is a party to the conversation or has consent from a party. Olivia was present and consented to her own recording, perfectly legal. By now, several police officers had arrived, responding to calls from concerned neighbors about the escalating confrontation. As they approached, my father seemed to finally grasp the futility of his position. "This is not over," he hissed, backing down the steps. "Family should not treat family this way." "On that we agree completely," I replied softly. The officers asked if there was a problem. I explained briefly that my family had made incorrect assumptions about property ownership and that everything was under control. My legal team provided additional context, showing the officers the trust documents and injunction. Defeated but still defiant, my parents and sister returned to their SUV. The moving truck pulled away, its mission unfulfilled. As they drove off, I felt no triumph, only a profound sadness for what family should have been, but never was in my case. Margaret squeezed my shoulder. "Your grandparents would be so proud," she said softly. "So very proud." Standing on the porch my grandfather had built, surrounded by people who had shown more care and loyalty than my blood relatives ever had. I knew she was right. This had never been about money or property. It had been about honoring the true meaning of family and the promises we make to those we love. In the aftermath of that confrontation on the porch, many practical matters required attention. Jake filed the necessary paperwork to create a permanent record of the trust's validity and my position as trustee. Nancy helped me secure additional legal protections against future challenges. The local police, now familiar with the situation, added extra patrols past the house for several weeks. Most surprisingly, the district attorney's office contacted me about pressing charges for attempted fraud and forgery. After much soul-searching, I declined to pursue criminal charges against my own family despite their actions, not out of any residual affection, but because I knew my grandparents would have wanted me to take the high road. The DA respected my decision, but kept the case file open just in case. For several months, I lived with a persistent anxiety, jumping at unexpected sounds and constantly checking security camera feeds. My parents made a few more attempts at contact, alternating between threats of endless litigation and plaintive appeals to family loyalty. Eventually, when it became clear that the trust was indeed ironclad and that I had significant evidence of their fraudulent intentions, the communications stopped entirely. Living alone in the house that had once been filled with my grandparents' warmth and wisdom was both a comfort and a source of pain. Every room held memories. Grandpa reading in his favorite chair by the fireplace, Grandma humming in the kitchen as she prepared Sunday dinner, the two of them dancing slowly to old records in the living room when they thought I was studying. Upstairs, the silence was sometimes overwhelming. I found myself talking aloud to them, asking for guidance, or simply sharing my day as I had when they were alive. Sometimes I imagined I could hear Grandpa's deep chuckle or catch the faint scent of Grandma's perfume. Grief, I discovered, does not follow a linear path. It circles back unexpectedly, triggered by a familiar sound or the changing of seasons. Recognizing that I needed help processing all that had happened, I began seeing Dr. Lillian Parker, a therapist specializing in grief and family trauma. Her gentle questions helped me untangle the complex emotions: grief for my grandparents, anger at my parents, betrayal, guilt over sometimes wishing for a normal family, and a profound loneliness that seemed to have no bottom. "What you are experiencing is complicated grief," Dr. Parker explained during one session. "You are not only mourning your grandparents, but also the loss of the idea of family as it should be. That is a significant double loss." Working with her, I learned to separate my parents' actions from my own worth, to recognize that their greed and manipulation reflected their character flaws, not any failure on my part. Most importantly, I began to understand that family is not defined solely by blood, but by love, respect, and mutual care. My colleagues at the law firm became an unexpected source of support. Jake and his wife, Naomi, invited me to holiday dinners. Sophia checked in regularly with coffee and conversation. Even the normally reserved senior partners showed their concern through mentorship and inclusion in important cases. About 6 months after the confrontation, I made the difficult decision to renovate parts of the house, not to erase my grandparents' presence, but to blend their legacy with my own future. I kept Grandpa's library intact with his books and comfortable leather chair, but converted an unused bedroom into a modern home office. Grandma's kitchen remained largely unchanged, though I added new appliances that she would have loved exploring. The most significant change came when I established the Harold and Martha Morgan Scholarship Fund at my law school, dedicated to supporting students interested in elder law and protection of vulnerable populations. Using a portion of the trust's assets this way felt right, a continuation of their generous spirits, and a way to create something positive from our family's painful history. My professional life evolved as well. Drawing on my personal experience, I shifted my legal practice to focus exclusively on elder law and estate planning, working with families to create trusts and protective measures that would prevent the kind of exploitation my parents had attempted, became deeply satisfying. Each client protected felt like a small victory, a ripple effect of good from my grandparents' wisdom in establishing our trust. Slowly, I built a new kind of family around me. Margaret continued visiting regularly, now more friend than employee. My neighbors, who had witnessed the drama unfold on my porch, became closer, inviting me to block parties and community events. I joined a book club that met monthly, finding connection through shared stories, just as I had with my grandparents. 2 years after that confrontation on the porch, I received a small envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a brief note from Valerie: "I am sorry for what happened. They were wrong, I was wrong. I miss you." No request for money, no mention of the house or estate, just a simple acknowledgement and what seemed like genuine regret. After much consideration, I responded with an equally brief note. "Thank you for saying that. It matters." I did not invite further contact, but left the door slightly ajar. Whether anything would come of it remained to be seen, but the exchange felt like a small step toward healing, if not reconciliation. As for my parents, I have had no contact since that day. Sometimes I see their names in my email spam folder or notice a missed call from an unknown number that might be theirs. I have made peace with the likelihood that we will never have a healthy relationship. That acceptance, painful though it was to reach, has been liberating. The most profound lesson from this journey has been understanding that family is not an automatic guarantee of love or loyalty. True family, whether related by blood or bound by choice, must be built on respect, honesty, and genuine care. My grandparents showed me what real family means, and in their absence I have found new ways to honor that legacy by creating my own chosen family of friends and mentors. I still sit on the porch, swing some evenings, especially in spring, when the garden Grandma loved bursts into bloom. The house no longer feels empty, but filled with both memories and new possibilities. The trust my grandparents established protected more than just property. It preserved a foundation from which I could rebuild and grow after loss. For anyone facing similar challenges with family and inheritance, my advice is simple: document everything. Trust your instincts, and remember that protecting yourself against exploitation honors those who truly loved you. Standing firm against those who would take advantage of the vulnerable is not selfish. It is an act of courage and integrity. Have you ever had to protect yourself or someone you love from family members who showed their true colors when money was involved? Share your experience in the comments below. Sometimes knowing we are not alone in these difficult situations can be incredibly healing. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for what is right, even against family, is sometimes the most loving choice we can make. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the strength to protect what matters most in your own life.